Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining this final session of the day and for being here at our conference, our annual winter conference, NOFA, Massachusetts. We've had a fantastic day. Hope you have enjoyed. And I'm happy to have this session going raw as an option for organic dairies with a collection of the Raw Milk Institute with us. So I know that we're in for a wonderful educational experience here. I'm going to make a couple announcements and then we'll turn the controls over to them. At NOFA Mass, our commitment to racial equity and justice continues. At NOFA Mass, we are working to deepen our commitment to racial equity and justice, including honest work examining whiteness and dismantling systems of white supremacy that are part of many dominant systems, including our food systems. The foundation of modern organic agriculture is rooted in the long-standing cultural practices of BIPOC communities. We acknowledge that the U.S. was built on stolen land and that the food system was built on stolen labor of Black, Indigenous, Latina, Asian, and other people of color. Please take a moment to find your location on this map and honor those whose land you now occupy. I will drop this link in the chat for you to follow and explore that map as well. It is a global map. Also, there are a couple of resources here happening this weekend for all BIPOC participants. There is a BIPOC caucus tomorrow at lunchtime from 1 to 2 p.m. And at the end of the day tomorrow at 5:30 p.m., there is a Spanish lounge. The links are in the program book. The BIPOC caucus link is in the program book. And if you need the link to the Spanish lounge, you can email us and we will send one to you directly. And also for our white allies, here are some ways to center racial equity in your own work and support BIPOC communities. These are actions NOFA Mass is striving to embody and making progress on. Basic Zoom etiquette here: when you enter, you are muted. So please manage your mute button when there's noise in the background. If the presenters would like to allow you to come off of mute and ask a question, that is totally fine. But please manage your mute button when you are through speaking. Please use the chat feature as much as you want. We'll monitor the chat and I or one of the presenters will address your question, and we'll try to get to all the questions that come along. And also, please note this session is being recorded. We're very grateful to our sponsors of NOFA Massachusetts who support us throughout the year and particularly for the winter conference. We couldn't do this work without our sponsors, and we hope that you will check out their presence in our program book, where there are live links that bring you to their websites, and some are offering particular conference specials. We also have an online auction that is live and has fantastic items for you to bid on. So bid often and bid up. But there are wonderful items in the auction. I think you'll be very happy to visit that page. The link is also in the program book and it is here. I will also share the link in the chat. Same with our virtual vendors. They're represented in our program book with some live links, and you can visit them through those links. And some have videos embedded in the program book. And that is my brief presentation. At this time, I'll turn the controls over to our Raw Milk Institute cohort here.
Thank you, Jason. This is Mark McAfee, and Sarah's going to be running the slides today for us at Raw Milk Institute. So Sarah, thank you for bringing those up. I want to welcome everyone to this session. It was particularly important for us to reach out to those organic dairies in the Northeast that have lost their organic contracts, been kind of pushed out of the Danone Horizon group of brands that have been buying organic milk for a long time, for 20 years or more in the Northeast. but just in the last 6 months have decided to drop those contracts in lieu of picking up their milk from larger CAFO type operations in the Midwest. So we at the Raw Milk Institute are very dedicated to small organic raw dairy farms, health of the soil, health of the farm, health of the cows, health of the consumer, health of the farmer. All those things are very key to us. And we've now been in existence for 12 years. So we've been working with farmers all around the world to develop food safety plans so they can effectively serve their customers and make good value-added products from the farm to the consumer. We're a nonprofit 501c3 founded in 2011, and our mission is to improve the safety and quality of raw milk. And when you do that, there's a massive ripple effect that happens across the entire food chain, which is really dramatic. It helps save farms. It helps save consumers. It's good for everybody in the entire food chain. So we have established raw milk standards, which are now been kind of accepted everywhere around, called the common standards. We've trained hundreds of farmers around the world, and we listed 29 farmers, and we have more pending to be listed. Listing is a way for us to say certified, but we use listing instead. But that's had a kind of interesting effect across Canada, across the United States, and other countries, including UK, Great Britain, and other countries where raw milk is wanted, but the supply has been questionable because of safety problems. Well, in the last 10 years, we've made a big impact on that. And I'm proud to say there's 2 published peer-reviewed pieces of literature out in the PubMed and other locations have been published that actually show the impact of this training on farmers. When we do 3 things, we train the farmers, establish good standards, and do testing, those 3 things, and the quality and safety of raw milk improves dramatically. So that's what we're all about. To kind of frame myself a little bit for myself, I'm a retired paramedic. My first chapter in life, I was a paramedic, a medical educator, ran 15,000 paramedic calls. My wife's a nurse, so we kind of have a medical background together. I founded the Raw Milk Institute back in 2011 and 12 because of my efforts at Raw Farm. It was then called Organic Pastures Dairy, where I had a couple challenges back in 2004 and 5, where we produced some raw milk that was not pathogen free, and we had some recalls. So I took this very, very personally, emotionally, deeply, spiritually. It moved me that I would ever make someone sick. As a paramedic, my job was to make people well, save their lives. To make somebody sick was just startling to my core. So we stepped forward and became really, really involved in food safety management and how you go about from grass to glass, managing all the sort of risks you could have in a food chain, and holistically managing those risks to reduce the overall risk of the raw milk it produces. And I've become kind of a HACCP plan specialist. I've gone to school for that, Chapman University, and was the first farmer in America to be certified in HACCP, which is interesting. I won a big award back in 1996 with the Odwalla incident that had just passed with food safety. So that's kind of my background, but I'm also the owner of Raw Farm now, which is the largest raw milk dairy in the world, serving 625 stores in California with the #1 selling brand of fluid milk, whether it be pasteurized or raw. We're #1 in California in these stores, the 135 Sprout stores. And we have about 1,200 stores or so nationally that carry our truly raw cheeses. So that said, that's me. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Joseph Heckman, and I'm a professor of soil science at Rutgers University. Going back, I should say that I grew up on an organic dairy farm in Ohio. So I grew up drinking raw milk. I've always liked it. I continue to drink it today. I was asked to join the Raw Milk Institute board, and I'm happy to serve there. My main focus at Rutgers is soil science, but I've been very active in the raw milk movement. I published a paper about the history of the organic movement and the raw milk movement. Be happy to share that with you if you're interested in reading it. I also have a farm in Hunterdon County, New Jersey, which I farm organically. So that's me and my cows.
All right.
Hi, I'm Sarah Smith, and I am in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And I've been with the Raw Milk Institute now for a few years. Mark asked me to join a few years ago after we had worked in another nonprofit together. And I'm not a farmer, but I am actually a raw milk consumer. I've raised both of my kids on raw milk. I drank raw milk through both of my pregnancies. And the reason was the fantastic nutrition that comes from raw milk that you're not going to find elsewhere. I'm also a homeopathic practitioner, and I'm also a food and health writer and a lifestyle consultant. And my background before that was focusing on aerospace engineering for NASA for 10 years. Before I had my second child. So now I focus a lot on Raw Milk Institute and doing healthcare work, and also homeschooling my kids who are now 11 and 14. So that's me.
Right on.
So as far as the attendees who are here, if you guys would be willing to turn on your cameras, we'd really appreciate it, because it helps us kind of connect with you and see if you've got questions, or if it looks like we need to stay longer in any particular area, that would be really helpful. By show of hands, are any of you guys here actually currently dairy farmers? Laura? Okay.
Yay.
And so the others of you, I guess, who aren't here as dairy farmers, are you considering doing dairy farming, or more wanting to learn about raw milk farming? Maybe you're a consumer like I am. Okay, and Suzanne, I see you have dairy goats, great. So as we go through our presentation today, feel free to drop questions in the chat, and we'll try to answer questions as we go. We're also going to have a Q&A at the end of the presentation, where we can have more of an open discussion with you guys on anything that you need to know. So here's just an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. We'll start off with some history of raw milk and information about health benefits and legality of raw milk, and then also benefits for farmers to actually selling raw milk as opposed to pasteurized milk. We'll talk somewhat about the safety and risks of raw milk, and then our method for managing the risks for raw milk. And then Mark's going to share information about how to actually build a successful raw milk market. So I'm going to turn it over now to Joe for raw milk history.
Hello, everyone again. So the story of dairy is very, very interesting. We've been consuming milk for thousands of years, and it's one of the things that has helped humanity thrive, because it sustained people when maybe there was just grass out there for animals to graze. And then this could be converted into a very healthy food by animals that are mammals that produce milk. And then in the 1800s, there was a period of time when cows were brought into cities, and they didn't have real good transportation systems. And so there was a tendency to concentrate the cows close to where people needed the milk. And this resulted in very unsanitary milking conditions. The cows were poorly fed. They were not fed on pasture. And this was associated with a lot of illness and disease, a lot of very dirty, unsanitary conditions. So there was two competing movements at the time. There was the movement towards a sanitary practices, good production, clean practices, supervised by medical doctors. And there was a group started in New Jersey, the Certified Milk Commission. And then the competing option was to heat treat the milk and to pasteurize it. And so really it was an industrial solution to a problem that was created by bad production practices. Let's move on. So as I was saying, there was a medical milk commission that oversaw the production of clean, safe milk known as certified milk. And this lasted for at least a century. And it was a little more expensive to produce milk this way, but it was also associated with less disease, and there was health benefits that were recognized when people consumed milk in its fresh, unprocessed way. So eventually pasteurization became the norm. It was promoted as a cheaper way, and it was a way of really industrializing a food system. And so now pasteurization is done on a massive scale. And for many years, going into organic dairy farming, and there were many small organic dairy farms, and this was a very good option. And it was very helpful to the early organic farming movement, when we had the USDA get involved in the organic standards, the Organic Food Production Act in 1990. But the system has become corrupted over time, and now we have these mega so-called organic dairies. It's questionable whether they actually put their animals on pasture, even though that is a requirement. And they produce milk on such a massive scale, it just undermines the integrity and the original spirit and the original spirit of the organic movement. And today it's put small organic dairy farms in crisis. And now there's some organic dairies in the Northeast that are losing their contracts, where a truck will come to pick up the milk and take it to a processor. And so we're going to offer another option. Let's move on. So organic raw milk dairy farms have the potential to thrive. We know this. We've seen it in many states, and there's a market for it. There's increasing customer demand. And the other thing is, if you want to be an organic farmer, having raw milk for sale is going to help you sell many, many other products as well. Let's move on.
Okay, thanks, Joe. So I'm going to talk now about the health benefits of raw milk. And there we go. So here's a chart that is comparing raw milk to pasteurized milk and to some of the so-called milks, almond milk, soy milk, and then also breast milk. And it's important to remember that raw milk and breast milk is a raw milk, right? So there are a lot of commonalities between breast milk and raw milk. And a lot of the things that we know about breast milk, like its immune supportive benefits, transfer over and are also true of raw milk. And so you can see, for instance, that of course there's still probiotics present in both breast milk and in raw milk. Pasteurization destroys the beneficial bacteria. It also destroys beneficial enzymes. So that really makes the digestibility of the milk go down, and it also decreases its ability to be a healthy food for people. That's part of what makes it allergenic, is the pasteurization of milk. Raw milk actually is not something that causes lactose intolerance for most people. My own family, my husband's family is lactose intolerant, and we found raw milk specifically because we had learned about this benefit of raw milk, that people who are lactose intolerant can generally consume it. And lactase enzyme is actually facilitated in the gut through drinking raw milk. So you end up in a situation where people who think they can't drink milk, a lot of times if they try raw milk, they find out they don't have any issues with it. They can digest it fine. They don't have any allergies to it. So that's a huge benefit in the market as well, being able to tailor the food to those people. Pasteurization also destroys a lot of other beneficial effects in raw milk. It really disrupts the proteins and another enzyme that gets destroyed in pasteurization is alkaline phosphatase. This enzyme is one that is being proposed now as one of the main reasons that we might have the French paradox, where people have these really low rates of cardiovascular disease, and that's because it's very anti-inflammatory. Now, the test for pasteurization is to actually determine if alkaline phosphatase has been destroyed. So that's getting destroyed in the pasteurization, but in raw milk and in raw butter, it's there, and it can help people a lot in terms of really supporting their health in the long term. There have been quite a few studies done on the health benefits of raw milk. Most of these studies are done in Europe, but they have shown that raw milk consumption really correlates to better immune systems. There was a study of 983 infants in Europe that found infants who drank raw milk had a 30% reduction in fevers and respiratory illnesses. So these are significant benefits that we've seen. Asthma is another thing that is really reduced in kids who are drinking raw milk. So we know it has beneficial effects on lung health as well. There have been studies showing that people who drank raw milk when they were growing up have better lung function as adults, and that adults who drink raw milk actually also have better lung function. There are also really good benefits for the gut. And, we're learning now about how much the gut really is sort of driving the overall immune system for people. And consuming raw milk really helps strengthen the gut. A lot of people have been able to cure issues such as Crohn's disease, irritable bowel, by using things like raw milk and raw milk kefir specifically as healing foods that will help heal the gut and restore gut balance. One of the other main reasons that people want to drink raw milk is because it tastes really good. It is one of those things where if you're used to drinking raw milk, pasteurized milk just does not cut it. It doesn't taste good anymore. My kids won't drink pasteurized milk because they've been raised on raw milk and it just doesn't taste good. So taste is a really big driver for consumers, and the RAWMI methods that we'll be talking about and that we train farmers on actually really help ensure that the flavor is really good and fresh and sweet, and that it stays that way for a long time. As far as legality, raw milk's different from state to state. Some states actually, like where Joseph is, raw milk is banned completely. They can't sell it there in any way. It depends on the state. The state I'm in, New Mexico, or where Mark is, it's retail legal, which means I can just buy it at the store. Massachusetts specifically allows on-farm sales and also pet milk. So it is allowed there within those specific confines. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Mark now.
All right. The benefits of selling raw milk. Next slide. There's a massive benefit economically to selling raw milk. If you look at the price per hundredweight that organic farmers get, and by the way, organic dairymen are getting less and less per hundredweight. At one point, it was like you'd get $40 to $45 a hundredweight. Now I think it's an exception to get more than 30, and a lot of people are getting $28, $25 per hundredweight. Because guess what? The big CAFO operations that Dr. Heckman was talking about that have 5,000 to 15,000 cows can operate very efficiently, especially if they're not pasturing their cows and giving them a TMR ration with high protein and lots of energy in it. So you can produce a lot of this, quote, fake organic milk, unquote, on a CAFO operation for very inexpensively. So certainly they do pretty well at 28 bucks a hundredweight, when a small 50 to 100 cow dairy may not do well at all at 28 bucks a hundredweight and maybe need $30, $40 a hundredweight to survive. So the economics of organic pasteurized milk production has shifted in the last 10 years, where it's become cheaper and cheaper when you cheat, when you don't pasture your cows and you don't follow the USDA rules. So the economics of raw milk are quantumly different. We're up at 100 to 140 bucks a hundredweight, or even higher depending on what markets you're in. It's a very localized market. We've seen milk up to $30, $40 a gallon in Canada, parts of the United States, where people are desperate to get it, and there's nobody producing it. So in other parts of the country, it may be $5 to $7 a gallon. But it's all over the country, it's multiple times higher than milk that's organic, that ought to be pasteurized with a processor. So what is the big deal here? Well, the big deal is the farmer is adding a lot of value to the product by having it be safe. He's using a different set of standards to produce milk for people versus milk for the processor. Milk for the processor, it doesn't matter how many pathogens is in it because it's all going to get pasteurized, it's going to get cooked. Well, that means you can put poop in the milk and get away with it. But raw milk for people is an entirely different thing. You cannot have it be unclean. You have to make sure that you're using high standards, low coliforms, low standard plate counts, rapid chilling, dry udders, clean, healthy udders, clean environments, cold chilling. All those things roll into a very high value added, which is not the same standard as what you're selling to be pasteurized. So selling to people has an innate value added to it, where the people, you can't just give them anything. You have to have very high standards to do that. And as a result, the farmer gets two things back from people. He gets thank you, and he gets paid more. Well, those are two things that the organic farmer on the farm that's selling to a processor don't get. They don't get any thank yous. Nobody's on the farm saying, thank you so much for how delicious your raw milk is, give me a hug and a kiss. And they're not getting paid. So it's isolation and economic deprivation on the organic farm most of the time. That's what I've seen. Versus social integration, feeling important and being paid well on the raw farm where you're connecting directly to people. So big reason why you would shift to becoming your own brand, establish your own on-farm creamery and selling directly to people versus a processor. And I could talk for days about this subject because the implications are so deep, so broad, so wide, so essential, so important. And I've been blessed by having thousands of people thank me and hug me and tell me their stories of why their children are doing so well because of our products. And this is the same thing that happens to all raw dairymen, that consumer connection, which is so important to allow them to be strengthened in their heart because of all the support they're getting emotionally and socially. And then the economics. You feel much better when you're paid well and you can pay your people that work for you well. And the economics of what we're doing in America with escalating costs and everything can be offset by the fact that the farmer is setting his price. So there's a lot of really unique value added to the farm to consumer direct sale of raw milk. So pretty cool stuff. On a farm, you have seasonality of products that you grow. Well, raw milk is every day. You don't have to worry about the pumpkins in the fall being sold on the roadside for the pumpkin stand. You don't have to slaughter the beef cow and wait for the meat. Raw milk is every day. And by the way, consumers need their raw milk every day or every week. On the left-hand picture here, you see something very interesting. We're talking about sustainability, stability, and adaptability. During COVID, the left-hand side of the picture here with all these 6,000-gallon milk trucks being dumped out of the land or in a lagoon because the processors could not adapt to changing conditions. They couldn't adapt to the fact that the stores were wanting all the raw milk and schools were closed and restaurants were closed. And as a result, the processors were a log jam, just a milk clot where they couldn't take the milk. Even though the stores needed the milk, they couldn't get it there. So as a result, they dumped the milk and the farmers suffered. On the right side of the farm there, picture there, you see our friends back east at the Family Cow, and they thrived. Every raw milk dairyman I know and ourselves thrived during COVID because we were able to adapt to local conditions, changing conditions where people needed their raw milk. They wanted to build their immune systems. They needed something for their families today. The kids weren't in school anymore. They were at home. And they went down to the local raw milk producer and they got their raw milk. And our sales just went crazy because of the fact that we could adapt to these conditions. We were consumer connected. If they needed to have something changed, we changed. The processors couldn't do that. It took them months to adapt, and they have a very hard time shifting with times and conditions. So raw milk production provides economic and social stability and nutrient-dense foods that are local and in demand, and the farmer knows what changes happen because they hear it directly from the consumer versus from a processor that rarely ever tells them what's going on. So pretty important. That's kind of my part of this thing here. Go ahead. I think
You're muted, Joe.
go ahead.
Okay. This is Joseph Ekman again, and I'm going to draw a connection to soil science and soil fertility, because really raw milk is about getting fresh food from fertile soil. The organic movement has long been about producing healthy, fertile soil. Rodale said way back in the 1950s that it's not organic to produce milk organically and then to pasteurize it. So really, the organic movement is about living systems. Here's a nitrogen cycle, and we put a cow and other livestock within it. And it's really about a cycle, and all of it is utilizing the gifts of nature. We don't need an industrial nitrogen fertilizer factory in there. Let's move on to the next slide. And I just got one more thing to share. All right, this is some of my data, and this is some soil test data that I collected from a raw milk cheese dairy farm in New Jersey. This farmer purchased a rundown farm that had been growing row crop corn and soybeans and a degraded soil and had very low organic matter content. He put the farm in permanent pasture, started grazing his cows, and I followed the soil test changes for 10 years. After just 5 years, the soil organic matter content had increased from 2.5% to 4%. So a dramatic increase in soil organic carbon. So the point of this is that putting cows and pasture out there on the land, dairy farming, small dairy farms dispersed across the land is one of the most effective ways to build soil fertility and to put carbon from the atmosphere, to put carbon into the soil. You can read more about this if you look up my newsletter called The Soil Profile at Rutgers, New Jersey Agricultural Experiment Station. So anyway, that's the main point I wanted to make about that. So once again, putting cows out on pasture, small dairy farms, it's an excellent way to build soil fertility. We've known this for a long time. It's just redocumented here. Thank you.
And I know it looks like half of you guys are goat farmers, goat dairy farmers. Please don't be put off by our cow-centric speech, but it goes for you guys too, and sheep as well. So I want to talk about safety and risks for raw milk, and this is, sort of the big bullet question, right? This is the one people always say, well, is it safe and is it okay? And this is, another case where what we're hearing isn't necessarily what is true, in fact. And we know, for instance, that raw milk produced intentionally is very different. And so this is a picture that Mark took, just comparing milk filters. So you've got here on the left, used milk filters from his farm. They basically look clean, they're just white. And then a milk filter from a nearby conventional dairy farm. So you can see that what is in the milk is completely different. And what is in Mark's milk is milk. And what you see in the conventional farm here, there's a bunch of stuff that's not milk that was actually in there, right? Which means they haven't cleaned things very well. You can probably guess what that brown stuff is. So there's a big difference between these two types of milk in terms of their pathogens and in terms of the risk of them. So yes, milk can absolutely have pathogens in it. The four main ones of concern for raw milk are Salmonella, Campylobacter, Listeria mono, and E. coli 0157H7. Now, E. coli is one that gets a lot of attention, and the reason for that is because with different pathogens, there are thresholds for illness. And for E. coli specifically, you only need to have a few bacterial cells for it to cause illness, and it can create very serious illness, which can lead to kidney failure and death. So E. coli, that's why it gets a lot of attention. But some of these other ones also could be present, on a homestead type farm. Salmonella or Campylobacter could be present on the farm and could be coming from poultry or other animals on the farm. Listeria would be of particular concern for people who are producing pasteurized and raw milk, because Listeria is known to grow very well in pasteurized milk. So these are the 4 main pathogens. When it comes to raw milk, the farmer has to have integrity, and they have to decide that they're going to commit in the long term to making sure that this is not happening, that there aren't pathogens in their milk. And that's really what the Raw Milk Institute focuses on, is teaching farmers how to do that, how to make sure that the milk is going to be low risk. So here's some data comparing milk from conventional farms to raw milk that's being produced intentionally for direct human consumption. So you can see that the milk that's being produced to get sent to the pasteurizer, it has a pretty high rate of pathogens. It can be up to 25–30% pathogen rate in that milk. But milk that's being produced for direct human consumption, we can have 0 pathogens. And we know this now. We've seen it in thousands of samples. We collect data from our farmers every month. They send us data, their test data. So there are categorically 2 different types of raw milk. And whenever people say raw milk is dangerous, they're talking about this pre-pasteurized milk. That's the raw milk that, yeah, if you go to a conventional dairy and say, hey, can I have some raw milk? You don't want that raw milk. It's going to have a high chance that it does have pathogens. But raw milk being produced for human consumption is very different from that. So the things that we teach farmers and the way that our system works is we mentor the farmers and we train them in how to produce low risk raw milk. And we also walk them through the process of creating a risk management plan for each farm, because every place is different. You know, the conditions in one farm might be really wet and muddy, and that might be a whole different thing than somebody who's operating where it's really dry. So those are different risks. Different kind of animals on different farms also create different risks. So we encourage the farmers to go through and think systematically through their whole system and think about potential risks, think about ways to mitigate those risks. And then we use testing as a confirmation step. And Mark mentioned that the Raw Milk Institute has developed testing standards for raw milk. We use those standards to assess the raw milk and to make sure that that risk management plan is working. We'll talk a little bit more about testing later on. So we do know at this point, there have been a couple peer-reviewed papers that have been published looking at whether or not raw milk can be done safely and what's happening right now. And what they have found is the methods that we are teaching are rippling out, and they're actually calling it the RAWMI effect, where they are seeing, even though there's an increased demand for raw milk right now, we are seeing lower outbreak rates overall. So over time, this is really trickling out. People are learning how to produce raw milk in a safe way. These 2 papers, one of these was from some researchers in British Columbia, Canada, and the other one was from researchers in Europe. And they are both showing that the RAWMI methods work and that they are able to produce low risk raw milk. And here's a chart showing outbreaks in the state of California specifically. And you can see here, and just so you know, I'm sure you know the FDA is somewhat against raw milk. I mean, that's pretty obvious. So outbreak data should be viewed with suspicion. For instance, this outbreak that you see here in 2012 includes some people who weren't even drinking raw milk, but they counted them as part of the outbreak numbers. So the numbers should be viewed with suspicion. Nonetheless, we can see that over time, this black line is showing how much raw milk is being consumed in California per year. And you can see that the volume of milk being consumed is going up a lot, but we have outbreaks actually reducing over time. And this just continues on to now. Mark,
Yep.
All right, so Mark's going to talk next.
Okay. Sarah, that was excellent. Thank you very much. The raw milk risk management. Let's talk about risk management now as we jump into these next slides. Go ahead. We found that size, to a certain extent, really doesn't matter as much as it is the mindset and the plan, the conditions that the farm has for the cows. So if you have a set of conditions which are very pro low risk raw milk, you're going to have low risk raw milk. But if you have a set of conditions, even with 1 or 2 cows, you can have a very high risk of raw milk illness. But you can have up to 500 to 600 cows if the conditions are right and have very low risk for raw milk. So size doesn't matter very much in this, but it does have everything to do with the mindset, the plan, the testing, the protocol, and the common standards used on whatever size operation you have. So from very small to very large, it has to do with conditions and mindset. On the left-hand side, these are optimal, wonderful conditions on the left-hand side. Sunshine, although that's kind of a foggy day there, but sunshine, cows laying down in green grass pastures and with biodiversity, all that good soil under them. That's a wonderful set of conditions for raw milk production for conditions. On the right-hand side, it's more of a CAFO environment where, you know, we even see some of this on raw milk farms as well, but you got to make sure that those cows, when they lay down in a fairly dry environment. And when they get milk, those udders are really, really clean. So that's kind of the not so good on the right-hand side that you see commonly across America on some dairies. Although I will say, in honor of those CAFO dairies have done a very, very good job of having compost bed packs, all that kind of stuff. They have clean udders. They've done a really good job of cleaning their udders. But overall, generally speaking, on the right-hand side is what you see in conventional milk going off to be pasteurized. So this is kind of the gambit of the general pictures you see of the optimal raw milk conditions on the left and the suboptimal high-risk conditions on the right-hand side that you see in the conventional dairies that sell their milk to be pasteurized. So all the conditions matter. The pasture, the cows, the water, the mindset, everything, conditions really matter. If you look at from grass to glass, there's kind of a continuum down the food chain here. We look at, it's kind of important to look at this. On the left-hand side, you see the grass, water, wild animals. Are there deer coming up and touching noses with your cows? Because deer can have tuberculosis. You know, in Great Britain, they've got wolverines that have problems with tuberculosis. Pasture conditions, udders, animal health and feed. What kind of body condition your cows are? Are they healthy cows or skinny cows? Are they undernourished? The cleaning of the udders, cleaning of the conditions there. The temperatures used, the high temperatures, the hot water temperatures used to clean things, and the low temperatures used to chill things. What are the temperatures? Chilling. How fast does the chilling take place? Is it done over 3 or 4 hours? Is it done over 15 minutes? Done over 2 minutes? So the more rapidly you chill the milk, and the better these conditions are, the longer your shelf life, the lower the bacteria counts are going to be, the less risk there's going to be, and the longer, better flavor there's going to be in the milk. Testing. Do you do testing? Do you not do testing? Testing is a big wake-up call because if you set a standard in play and you test against it, you're going to know where you are. You're going to know if you're on the map or not. So it's very important to understand where you are according to the standards by doing testing. At Raw Farm, we test every day, twice a day for pathogens as well as call farms. Most other raw farms don't do that. However, I know a lot of raw dairies that Sarah and I and Joseph work with that test every day with using coliforms with Petrifilm. So testing is really kind of a cool thing to do because it allows you to understand where you are against the standards you're trying to use. And that's really important. Training, ongoing training. And I will say it's really kind of cool because at Raw Milk Institute, we've created a community of like-minded dairymen that are serving people. And so we're able to share our experiences with one another. We're a resource. We've got veterinarians, we've got biologists, we've got all kinds of people in our circles at Raw Milk Institute to help advise farmers that need help and mentor them. But we also get feedback from farmers that are having a challenge or having a question. And we learn from that. The farmers learn from us, we learn from farmers. And as a group, we have a collective organism that's learning. It's not artificial intelligence, it's human intelligence that's learning, but we're amassing more and more knowledge, and we're having the comfort of a community that can share comfortably and safely amongst each other. So this grass to glass continuum of food safety also reaches out to the consumers as well. So we really work on this a lot to make sure that the conditions are right across the gambit from grass to glass. Next. Herd health. You know, we've had a lot of people say, oh, I feed my cows this or feed my cows that. It's really important to understand the breed of your cow and where that cow is in her lactation, understanding the body condition, understanding, you know, that she's fed well, because milk is an extra for a cow. It takes a lot of energy to produce milk, and she's going to take from herself. She's going to dissolve her bones. She's going to take from herself. Her immune system will suffer by producing that milk. So we want to make darn well sure that it's a healthy cow, tested negative for tuberculosis, testing negative for brucellosis. And we've also recognized that freshening cows, when they first give birth to their calf, that first few weeks there is the highest risk for carrying pathogens. We recognized that many years ago that a couple of our cows that were freshening were the ones that had the problems with pathogens. And so now we segregate all freshened cows for 40 days before they even get into our raw milk herd. And we test all those cows separately. And that milk goes for other purposes. So we have identified risks and mediated them so we don't have those problems in our milk. And as a result, you see a massive decrease in any kind of incidence of detecting pathogens or having illnesses as a result of that. And that's really important for the brand, super important for the economics of the farm. And it's really, really, really vitally important for the consumers that don't want to get sick. And they want to have their milk they don't want to have the milk flow stop. They want to have a continuous supply, and milk flows stop when the state comes in to shut you down. So herd health and food safety is really, really important when it comes to the integrity of the entire food system for raw milk. Cleanliness. The closer you are to the milking systems, you really, really got to pay attention to the fact that the udders have to be clean and they have to be dry. And the milk coming from inside the udder has to be healthy milk. It can't have mastitis or things like that. So the systems we have at the Raw Milk Institute actually go about that whole process of making sure the udder is clean, and what comes out of the inside of the udder down the teat canal is actually not pathogenic, that it's clean. We want to see uncluttered, clean environments for milking the cows, for bottling the milk. We want to see really clean milk systems. We want to see the actual milk machines, the milk claws maintained well. We saw a problem a few years back where one of the claws had an inflation that was cracked. So the milk got behind the inflation and you couldn't clean it out, and there was listeria in there. So we learned from these issues, and milk claw maintenance and dairy system maintenance is very, very important in terms of assuring that what comes out of the cow and gets to the consumer is actually not contaminated by the farm or the farmer. So that's very important. We don't like chickens or birds to be in the milking areas, but they can certainly be out in the pastures. But we also prefer, if you're going to do pastured chickens, that they follow the cows, they don't lead the cows, because chickens can have high levels of salmonella and campylobacter. We certainly don't want to get that on the cow's udders and in the milk. We also want to make sure humans are clean. That in fact, there's a place to just wash your hands and keep your boots clean and things. Just stay clean, because what we want is clean raw milk, nothing else. So we've got to be pretty careful to make sure we're not sick ourselves, adding pathogens for our own respiratory problems, and we're healthy and we're clean, and every system around it is clean. It's start to finish. It's a holistic approach to being clean. Now, we aren't sterile, we're clean, and there's a big difference between the two. When the FDA comes to inspect our dairy here at Raw Farm, they have yet to find a pathogen in the swab tests in our dairy. And that's because our creamery has an immune system, We have a lot of kefir, which is a highly probiotic food with good bacteria. And those good bacteria occupy all the crevices and cracks and the drains and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, we clean with hot water, yeah, but we don't go about sterilizing. And we want the good probiotic bacteria to actually permeate the environment and be what's there in the cracks. We don't want pathogenic bacteria to be there. And so you got to be careful the kind of cleaning equipment and cleaning chemicals you use, which can actually promote the growth of pathogens, because there's no good bacteria. And that is kind of a holistic fact for the world. If you have a void, Mother Nature will fill it. And if good bacteria are killed off, guess what occupies that void? Bad bacteria. Same thing in the human body. So we look at the science of this, we look at the biology of this very carefully to understand that we have immune systems throughout our food chain, from the soils being vital and whole and alive, through the grasses and all through the cow's udder and her immune system, all the way through the milking of the cows and the chilling the milk, through the bottling, through the consumer, all those things. We want it to be clean, but we're not looking for sterile. We're looking for good conditions there. Cold chain. It's important to have good flavor and a long shelf life. If you don't chill your milk quickly, you're going to get soured milk pretty early, and you're also going to be creating some yogurt-like products. That's fine if you want to make yogurt, but fresh, clean, delicious raw milk needs to be chilled very rapidly if you're going to get the 16 to 20-day shelf life where the bacteria is not growing. Now, these are beneficial yogurt-like bacteria, but in body temperature, those bacteria double every 20 minutes or so, 22 minutes. So it doesn't take very long for raw milk beneficial bacteria to quickly create lactic acid conditions and acidify the milk and create clabbered milk or sour milk, which is no longer raw milk. It's some kind of a fermented product. So if you want to sell raw milk, you need to rapidly chill your milk. At Raw Farm, we chill our milk down to about 36 degrees in about 2 minutes. It's gone through a flash chiller. This practice on the left-hand side here in the ice bath chills the milk down in less than an hour, sometimes as close as 35, 40 minutes, it's down below 38 degrees, where the bacteria count is not growing very quickly at all. In fact, it's kind of stagnant, waiting a long period. So keeping it cold is very, very important, and that's something we really work on. Depending on the size of the farm, different kinds of technology is used to chill it. On the bigger farm, you use a flash plate chiller. On smaller farms, you use bottling like this and immersion in ice bath. Next.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
You bet.
That's kind of like a quick course. We teach a full 4-hour course that's just about risk management, but for this training today, we wanted to give you guys more of a kind of a taste of that, and then talk some more about some other things for farmers who might be considering switching to raw milk.
Sarah, if I could add in, Sarah. Sarah did a beautiful job of taking a recording, a 4.5-hour recording, and breaking it into 17 segments, which we have on our website, to allow farmers to get really deep into each of these areas we talked about briefly here online for free. So welcome to the Raw Milk Institute to go look at that and look at those 17 segments, which can take you a really in-depth dive into this issues we're talking about. Go ahead, Sarah, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Mark. So as far as the testing, we talked about that testing is basically a verification step. So, the farmers have developed a plan for managing their risks. They're doing everything they can. The testing actually is a way to verify that it's working. And it also helps farmers identify when something starts to go amiss. And so the standards that we recommend, our common standards, are for a rolling 3-month average of less than 5,000 for a standard plate count test. And that's basically just looking at how many bacteria there are and how much they're growing. And for coliform tests, we aim for less than 10 coliform bacteria per milliliter. Now, those tests are being used as a general indicator to tell us that the milk is being produced in a hygienic way. If you had manure on the udder, then that's going to show up in your coliform test. You're going to start to see bacteria growing there. So these different tests are used. They sound kind of technical, but the gist of it is they are telling you whether or not you're producing your milk cleanly. They tell you whether or not you are servicing your milking machine properly and cleaning those equipment parts properly. They also can help you figure out if you have a chilling problem. Maybe your milk's not staying cold for some reason, or you're not chilling it very quickly. You'll see the bacteria counts rise then. So that's where these standards come in. And our rule of thumb is to have people do it at least once a month to have these tests done. Those monthly tests will also help you find out, maybe there is something has gone wrong with a seal in your system, and you have a biofilm of bacteria growing somewhere, so that you've got increased bacteria coming from your milk equipment instead of from the actual udders. So the testing will show you those things. It gives farmers a way to measure what they're doing and to know when they need to actually adjust and change what they're doing. Mark mentioned that we know quite a few farms who are doing daily testing, and these are small farms. We're not talking large farms. The reason is that there's an on-farm lab setup that dairies can use, and it runs about $800 to $1,000 to get it set up. We actually offer grants for that for farms who are going through our listing process to offset the cost. We offer grants for $600 for farms who want to set this up. And the on-farm lab, it really in the long run decreases testing costs because it's only a couple dollars to run each test once you have it set up, versus sending your milk off to a lab where you might be paying quite a lot more than that for your monthly testing. The on-farm lab gives the farmers the option to test as often as they want to. So some of them, they start out and say, I'm going to get a lab and maybe test once a week. We've seen that a lot of our farmers, they almost get addicted to testing. It's such a good measure of showing them if what they're doing is working, that oftentimes we see farmers increase the amount they test over time. because it is so cheap. If you're only paying $1 or $2 per test, you can test a lot more. And if they are having any sort of problems, having the on-farm lab really helps with troubleshooting, because they have a way to measure and see if they're fixing things and if it's working. It's also a really good thing for states that require testing to test in advance of the state test, right? Make sure that you know what's going on with your milk before the state tells you what's happening. So just one quick plug for our RAWMI listing program. It's completely free, and we offer it to any farmers. We are a nonprofit, so the mentoring is free, and it can be any size of farm. And we will help you develop your own risk management plan and figure out ways. You know, our listed farmer community meets on Zoom once every few months, and that has become a really valuable tool for farmers to have ongoing connection with other dairy farmers around the country and around internationally too. We have some Canadian farmers there. They can share marketing tips. They can talk about, you know, tips for how to get good results with grass-fed only. There's a lot of different things that the farmers can discuss there, and it becomes a really powerful tool. So we highly recommend any of you guys who are interested in selling raw milk to go ahead and contact us for our listing program. And you don't have to have your system perfect before you do listing. We can use it to help you refine your system and figure out, you know, any kind of trouble areas that you might have. So it's not something that has to be done when when you think your system is done and complete and perfect. It's really a process that works with you as you're growing. Okay, so go ahead, Mark.
Okay, thank you. That was great, Sarah. Just as a quick little one-off story, Montana changed their raw milk laws in May of last year, 2021. SB 199 was passed, which allows total food sovereignty and freedom up there for raw milk production. I think it was kind of an overreaction because the state had suppressed raw milk legality for so many years. People were just upset with the state, and they got the laws changed completely in the favor of the raw milk. But the problem was there was no standard set. And as a result, within a few months of SB 199 passing in Montana, there was some illnesses reported, and there was all kinds of problems. Anyway, we got a phone call from one of the farmers that was really desperate, and we went up there right away and established a on-farm lab. And literally overnight, within 3 days, she went from crazy bacteria counts going nuts all over the place to understanding the risk and doing daily testing. So the testing revealed less than 1 call forms when I left. So we went up there with standards training and some testing, although she's not listed yet. She's just applied. And it's dramatic to see the cart before the horse. She's not even listed yet. And what do you know? We changed her bacteria counts to absolutely fantastic within 3 days. So it's pretty cool on the testing side, what you can do there with some technology and a change of mindset. And the fact she was scared to death that she didn't want to be somebody that made somebody sick. She wanted to make people healthy. So her heart was in the right place. She used the right technologies and things changed. So let's talk about building a successful raw milk market. Well, it's about the food chain, guys and gals. Organic pasteurized milk stops at the farm gate. Raw milk goes all the way out to the consumer's gut. So you can see these things here. Yeah, on raw farm or organic farm, you're going to be milking the cows. Yeah, check, check. Nutritional management. Yeah, you're checking that. Herd milk. Yeah, yeah. Pasture management. Yeah. But milk bottling. Nope. There's no bottling going on in the organic farm that's pasteurizing. That gets sent off to the pasteurizers, the Danone people that don't love you anymore, right? We bottle our own milk on the farm at the raw milk dairies. We test our own milk. The consumer connection is absolutely very, very vital, because if you don't have consumers coming to buy your raw milk, you don't have a market. So the ability to make consumer connection is really, really important. That means you have to have some people skills. If you don't have people skills, then get somebody on your team that does have people skills. That means social networks, websites, the ability to shake hands, speak with the face, give warm hugs, ask people questions about how they're doing, how does the milk taste, how's it going in your life. Make that interpersonal connection. That's not required on an organic pasteurized milk dairy. It is required on a raw milk dairy. So there's a lot of sociological implications with what the farmer has to have in their heart, or at least on their team, to make sure they can make that connection to people. That's a very, very vital thing. I can't overstate that. The people part is really important. The people part is really important. Building your brand. All of these elements come together. Posting your bacteria counts on your website, bragging about how great you are on your bacteria counts. It's a fantastic way to build your brand. How warm you are, the conditions you are, the fact that you painted your fences white, you got beautiful cows, and you've got a place that people can come to get their milk, or you deliver an ice chest or whatever it might be. That's your brand. That's your living embodiment of you. And it's so important to build that brand so it's greater than you. It includes the consumers, includes all the goodwill around what you do and how you do it. The brand is really super important. It becomes very, very valuable. I know the Raw Farm brand in California has become really, really valuable. And so, you could have a problem in the middle of your food chain and people are going to say, what's going on here? I want my raw milk because I love you guys. And there'll be outpouring of support for you if you have a problem, whatever kind of problem that might be. So pretty important as far as the consumer connection to people versus the processor, which doesn't really care about that stuff at all. The processor wants things cheap. They don't want necessarily the relationship per se. So the consumer connection is really, really important. On-farm sales, absolutely. You're going to push the flesh. You're going to have people-to-people connections. You're going to make a warm environment for them to come to where they feel welcomed. They feel the farmstead feel. You're going to have to know some information about raw milk so you can teach people about raw milk. I have a little poster on my farm that says, you don't sell raw milk, you teach it. So you need to become an educator, not just a farmer, but an educator. Because people ask a question, you need to have at least the resources to answer or know how to get the resources to answer, because you need to be a resource for your consumers. And if you can't give them the information that they're looking for, then they're going to search for somebody that can. So Raw Milk Institute is actually a resource for farmers so they can answer questions given to them directly by consumers who want to know more about their farm fresh milk. Farm tours. Consumers want to know their farmer. The USDA has a program called Get to Know Your Farmer, Get to Know Your Food. And it was actually interesting. It was welcomed when it was brought in, but when it was actually done, the processors freaked out and didn't like it, because when you consumer meets a farmer, they bypass a processor. And everybody over at the USDA, they're all mad with the processors. So it's interesting to see. I don't mean to blame the USDA, but that program has not been promoted very much because it bypasses the processor. Get to know your farmer, get to know your food. What's that? That's raw milk. That's not processed milk. That's raw milk. So that program really works well on a raw farm. So there are real families with children and moms and dads and old people that are depending on you, want to know you, want to trust you, want to be able to measure your morals and ethics, whether you care, who you have working for you and how they're doing the work with you and for you. So if you're not a people person, you might want to find somebody on your team that will be, because it's really important for people to feel welcomed and feel embraced and loved when they're buying your product. So they're not just getting raw milk, they're getting love and information, all these other things at the same time, and they're getting safety, they're getting a whole package of things, which ends up being your brand. What else do I have here? Do I have another slide? Okay. I think I've covered this a little bit, but the brand is literally a representation of holistically everything that's associated with the memory of you, the taste of your milk, the reliability of the taste of your milk, what it looks like, how it feels like. It's how people feel when they drink your milk. The fact that it's digestible and that it came from you and you gave them the gift of strong bones and strong teeth and strong immune systems. It's that whole goodwill cycle of you and your farm and your consumer all linked together. And yeah, it could be the color logo on the side of your brand. That's important. But it's what it represents in the hearts, minds, and souls and guts of the consumers when they think about you. Very, very important. Advertising, local markets, best to flesh. You're going to be at a farmer's market. Obviously, you have the ability to actually talk to people directly, give out free samples so people can taste your milk and understand how delicious it is. And you can educate them about all these wonderful benefits in raw milk that are basically the same list of the things you see from breastfeeding, which is really great, because what's interesting about that is there's no contention or dispute anywhere in the world that I'm aware of that says breastfeeding is bad. The World Health Organization, the CDC, the NIH, the FDA, all the doctors, everybody, pediatricians, gynecologists, everybody says, feed your babies, breastfeed your babies as long as long. That's mammalian raw milk. But when we shift to another species of animals, from humans to cows, goats, sheep, horses, camels, reindeer, water buffalo, and we talk about raw milk, those organizations say, oh, that's horrible, don't do it. Well, we've done that for 10,000 years or longer. We've been consuming raw milk from other mammals. Well, we have to have that educational crossover to educate. So local markets and education are really, really important. The word of mouth from satisfied consumers, we call that the click of mouse. So word of mouth, not word of mouth, but word of mouse. You know, people clicking and talking amongst each other about how fantastic their raw milk is and how their asthma got better, or their allergies got better, or their Crohn's got better. Oh my gosh. You talk about a firestorm of people going, oh my gosh, I've got an awesome raw milk producer that I know that I can get raw milk from. So word of mouth is really important. Building your website, your social media presence. If you have a little organic dairy that sells to a processor, you can be private in the back 40 and never talk to anybody. The milk truck picks up your milk and away it goes. But when you're building raw milk, a website, social media presence, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever it might be, the next generation knows a lot more about it than I do. But the bottom line is super important platform to be able to go live and tell your story to thousands of people that want to hear it and get feedback from them. Very important to have that web presence in advertising, as well as word of mouth and all these other mechanisms that happen to build this. When you sell raw milk, you become a magnet for people to come to the farm to buy your raw milk. Well, when they come to buy your raw milk, they also might want to be interested in buying your sausages you make, or the onions you produce, or the fruit vegetables, or the apple juice, or whatever it might be. You know, whatever it is that you're selling on farm, you have an opportunity to make a relationship. The eggs you produce, the chicken. So the raw milk is a bring them in for exclusive, wonderful niche product, but you also then get to diversify to sell other products, which is to fill up their basket to take home from your farm direct food. So it's a wonderful opportunity to build a greater market than just raw milk. Next. This is so important. You have to have the willpower in your heart, in your mind, in your soul to strive for excellence. If you can do that, you got the DNA to do raw milk, but you can't just slop it on. You can't do great all week and then take the weekend off. You've got to do raw milk 24/7 as a commitment in your soul. And so safe raw milk is a dedication to integrity. And let me tell you, if the integrity is lost, guess what happens? You get shortened shelf life, you get off flavored milk, and you may even get somebody sick. So you got to be serious about this and take it really seriously for ethical and moral and liability and all kinds of reasons, brand integrity to do it. Safety in raw milk is a long-term commitment and a long-term mission. There are things happening right now that are going to evolve raw milk rapidly in the next couple of years, because on-farm testing for pathogens, which is normally done in a lab, may become available on farm. And if you have a pathogen test that you can get the data back in an hour or two, tell me, what use would there be for a pasteurizer to assure safety if you have a test that's 99.9% effective on raw milk on the farm right now? Wow, you just revolutionized through technology consumer liability concern about pathogens and getting sick with your raw milk on farm. So there's things that are happening here that it's not constant. It's a dynamic, ever-changing force of time with technology that's coming in. Like 10 years ago, we didn't have 3M Petri film testing for coliforms on farm. Now we can do it for $2 and get the data back in just a few hours. So things are changing. And that's why we say it's never fully completed or perfected, because we have to be perpetual students, always willing to learn, always willing to get better and adapt and be resilient to whatever changes occur coming towards you. There's always going to be something learned, and there's always going to be something to teach. So it's dynamic in that regard. And that brings you a lot of value because you're a student that's adapting. You wouldn't want to be stuck with a technology that's constant, because it's going to be overburdened by too much competition. And you need to have something you can adapt and be resilient and change with consumers and change with technology and change with the environment. The environments we live in are very adaptive. Next.
That's really it. So at this point, we want to open up for you guys for questions or discussion, more information that you're needing from us.
I'd love to hear if there's anybody that's selling raw milk now or thinking about selling raw milk and what their thoughts might be. You can unmute yourself and speak from your heart. Be brave, guys. Come on forward. Say something.
We have a question. We live in Rhode Island, and my daughter is my personal raw milk producer. We have a few goats, and we're just curious to see. In Rhode Island, we're not allowed to sell raw milk unless you can sell to somebody who has a doctor's prescription for goat milk. That's the only thing they allow. And however, they've never had anybody with a doctor's prescription, so it's never occurred. Our question is, how do you find what the demand is in your state, and to start? Do we start teaching people? We don't even know how to start to maybe change the law down the road.
Well, Susan, you are a pioneer. You're a pioneer in a really inhospitable environment, Rhode Island. Next door in Connecticut, you've got raw milk for sale legally. So you got a state line issue there. But my heart goes out to you, because here's the thing. You can produce raw milk and use the RAWMI standards, awesome, produce wonderful raw milk. You're going to have to be a pioneer. And that means be innovative and adaptive to your set of conditions, which includes politics. So that means that you can't use the same rules I've got in California or they got in Connecticut or Maine or Pennsylvania. You have to be innovative and creative. I see a big opportunity. Now, I was a paramedic for 16 years, 17 years, and I'm all into the medical field. I get that part. Well, you know what? You need to get a doctor that partners with you to give a whole lot of prescriptions out to a whole lot of people. Because I tell you what, if that's the loophole, you take advantage of it and you run with it all the way to the goal line. You do what you got to do. And what you do is you create your own dynamic growing market based on the goodwill of your heart, your daughter's heart, what you're doing, the goodwill of what you're doing, and the feedback you're going to get from your consumers. It's delicious. Oh my gosh, my kids are feeling so good. And their teeth are strong. They don't have cavities, and their bones are strong, and they don't have asthma anymore. All these things back and forth between you. You grow your own dynamic market in your own brand, in your own backyard. That's not like anybody else's. And that'll be yours. That'll be yours. So it's a tough thing. It is not easy, because you're in a place where that law is the way it is. But I will say this, if you do it for a little while, you got other people maybe doing it for a little while, and you got people, you don't know who your consumers are. You may have a patrol officer who loves your raw milk. You may have a judge. You may have a teacher. You may have a state senator or legislature. Your governor might fall in love with your raw milk. Well, after a while, you get about 2 degrees of separation between people, and they start thinking, why isn't this legal? This is crazy stupid. And then they go change the law because of people like you that are pioneers. This is not easy, but the rewards are tremendous. So that's what I would say to you, is you're kind of back a little bit, but I tell you what, you got a loophole. I would take that loophole and make sure you never, ever, ever have them manage you by exception. And that means you made somebody sick. Now you're the focus point of why we don't like raw milk in Rhode Island. So you want to make sure you never, ever have somebody sick. All you have is happy, healthy people that love you to death, that want to support you. So you've got to really have your game on if you want to change the rules. That's my feedback. Sarah, Joseph, you want to add to that?
I was just going to add too, Mark's talking about finding a doctor. A pediatrician is probably really where you want to get. If somebody who's treating kids who have asthma or eczema, those are the things that it's already been demonstrated that raw milk can help with those conditions. So, if you can start educating people about that, people don't realize, oh, asthma could go away for kids when they drink raw milk. That's amazing. And there's probably a lot of kids with asthma and parents who are willing to try it. So that might be kind of a niche for you to look at.
And these are PubMed articles, which is the Bible for the science, right? It's all right. You use PubMed only, NIH, right in your face. This is the Bible. This is the high integrity science that meets all the standards for being peer reviewed. You use that when you talk to pediatricians, and you stand on the hard ground of science. And you have PubMed behind you, and you have very, very good provable results on your goat milk, which low coliforms, no risk, nobody's getting sick. And then you actually have firm ground to do your battle. But it's one person at a time, building your market with safety and nutrition and feedback loops. And after a while, guess what? Your young daughter's going to grow up. She'll have herself a bunch of goats and a bunch of people loving her to death, paying a bunch of money for her milk, and she'll be the one standing before the legislator saying, I want to change the rules because guess what? We've got fantastic stuff. And just across the state line in Connecticut, they're doing this. Why can't we? And you know what? Your daughter will be a wonderful hero to somebody.
That's the plan. That's the plan.
Beautiful. But don't you give up, sweetheart.
It's good.
Joseph, anything?
I don't have anything to add. I think you've said it very well, Mark and Sarah. I mean, maybe I'll just say that you could try to connect with your local Weston A. Price chapter leaders. Sometimes they can be helpful and have some ideas to share. And maybe they know doctors that would write such a prescription.
That's a really good point, Joe. They probably have your market too. Those are the moms who are going to be looking for the milk and trying to figure out how to get it. Will be probably in the Western Price chapter.
You guys have goats down there? Is that what you've got?
Yes, we just have a few goats at this point, but this is as we're expanding we have a lot of woods, so we're trying to expand our property a little bit to have a little bit more. And she's only hand milking at this point, but we only have 3 that she milks at a time. And so we want to keep expanding. And I think since she homeschools, I think we're going to go with the home lab and maybe learn to do that. And as we're learning.
Well, the one thing I've learned is if you want to build a market, you have to have enough milk to serve people. If you don't have enough milk, you can. So you need to have 15 or 20 goats, and you get yourself a little milking machine, which has 2 teacups, not 4.
Right.
Half the problems with a goat, it's wonderful. And their poop isn't liquid, it's pebbles. And that's wonderful. Much easier to deal with a goat than it is to deal with a cow that's pooping all over the place, slurry. So I wish you the very best. And we are a resource to you. We're a friend to you. And we want you in our community to help you. It doesn't cost anything. And you'll get light speed, advanced progress made from understanding other people's challenges and gaining from all that without making those same mistakes again. And create a, you know, I don't know how you're going to do it, but you really need to find a pathway in the loopholes that you do have and dominate those.
I have another suggestion to add, and that is that in some states, and we're actually doing this in New Jersey, I know a couple of farms that are doing this, that is, they're applying to the Department of Ag to sell their raw milk as pet food. And so they will get a pet food label. And so this is a way to get kind of started in it. I'm not suggesting that anyone violate such a label and feed it to people, but still, there is another market out there, and that is there is a good market for raw milk as a pet food. It's very good for cats and dogs.
And interesting to note that cats and dogs have a very hard time with pasteurized milk, gas cramps and all kinds of problems, but in raw milk do just fine. In fact, at Raw Farm, we have a license from the FDA to produce pet food products, and we had to go through a whole veterinary discovery process and the implications of pet food as raw versus pet food as pasteurized. And what do you know? The studies come back very clear that dogs have a very hard time with pasteurized and do very, very well in raw. So there's just a tremendous amount of science out there to be on your side with raw milk, as long as it is safe.
Yeah, if you need help to get a label for selling raw milk as a pet food, contact Pete Kennedy at the Weston Price Foundation, because he's a lawyer, he's a food lawyer, and he knows how to go through this process.
Right. Okay. And is there anybody has like pamphlets that we could distribute, or?
We do. Raw Milk Institute has free pamphlets that talks about the benefits of raw milk and also the production practices on the Raw Milk Institute Common Standard side.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got these brochures that we can send you that you can use to help educate people where you are about the benefits.
And some of them have a little bit of a medical bent to them, which really goes nicely with your prescriptions you're going to get for everybody.
Right.
By the way, just as
too, I see some other questions in the chat. Someone's asking about lactose issues with raw milk, Donna. Yep.
Yeah, I didn't hear the first part. I apologize. So I didn't know if you had addressed that. I'm sure you probably did, but
explain that pretty well. Remember that raw milk is a whole food. Enzymes, probiotic bacteria, including the bacteria which create lactase enzymes in the presence of lactose sugar. Mm-hmm. You look at pasteurized dairy products, the bacteria are destroyed. The enzymes are inactivated, and all you got is lactose sugar. Well, raw milk, just like breast milk, when consumed, is a whole food. It has all the elements necessary for the baby to digest it. Because remember, babies have an immature digestive tract. They can't digest things that are not whole. That's why God and Creator himself created raw milk, because babies could digest it without having all the completely developed digestive tract things going on. When babies are born, they don't have bacteria in their digestive tract that has to come in through the birth canal experience and through contact with what's going on with food and everything else. So lactose intolerance is not commonly found with people that consume raw milk. Now, I will say this: those that have taken a lot of antibiotics, have had chemotherapy, have had all kinds of problems with sterile, they basically sterilize their gut. And it's not sterile, but it's certainly become a monoculture, not the diversity that needs to be able to digest foods. They have a problem with digesting raw milk too sometimes, until they built that biodiversity back up to include the lactobacillus bacteria and the coliform bacteria necessary to digest the lactose sugar and create lactase enzymes.
So remember, would it be better to consume the I used to call it kefir. I didn't realize it's kefir. Would it be better to consume kefir first and then switch over to milk?
Kefir is the ultimate gut biome microbiome inoculum. Let's put it that way. It's whole, complete, functional proteins are all there. Biodiversity is intact, and it has all the food to feed that bacteria. So it's a fantastic whole food. And it's also, it's the food of the ages for raw milk, because if you look back at the history of raw milk, it's probably not that many people drank raw milk. They drank it in soured form because the farmer didn't have refrigeration. It sat in the bucket for a few hours, and it was a kind of a kefir. And they'd add some cultures to make it sour properly and make it a nice sweet flavor thing. All through Russia, Mexico, all South America, you have these kefir products, which are fermented, which have a very long shelf life. And the raw milk is converted into that lacto-fermented product. It's delicious. You make all kinds of smoothies out of it, all kinds of stuff. But yes, it's fantastic.
It was interesting because I visited Africa for a month several years ago, and I remember seeing their milk. They just had it in a hefty plastic bag tied up on the counter, and that's what we had. And I didn't have any issues with that.
Well, the Maasai in Kenya tell you all about this.
Exactly.
They drink raw
milk. That's what they drink.
ferment it in a gourd, which has last week's mother culture in it from the inoculum. They didn't wash it out in between. So yes, there's a lot to be learned from primitive cultures that used raw milk very effectively and are rarely sick. They're very, very strong, have very good, robust immune systems. And that includes the Mongolians, which are Asian in outer Mongolia and China. Even though the Chinese are highly lactose intolerant, the Mongolians aren't. They drink fermented horse milk all the time. And the Africans in Kenya, the Maasai drink raw milk all the time, have no problems with lactose intolerance. But you come to America as an African, and they have all kinds of problems with lactose intolerance with pasteurized dairy products. So it's not the race. It's not the race.
My husband, when my husband came here, if he had a terrible time when he drank, the milk. So
One other thing too about the kefir, kefir is actually far superior to yogurt for recolonizing the gut. Kefir has a lot stronger bacteria, a lot stronger beneficial bacteria. And kefir has actually been shown to kill pathogens in the gut too. Some people will even have a die-off reaction when they start drinking kefir because the pathogenic bacteria in their gut is being killed by the probiotics in the kefir. So some people want to go a little bit slow with kefir at first, but it is absolutely superior.
I know. I read a lot about if people who have say spastic colon or all those issues should have it, because it also helps with that leaky gut syndrome and all that jazz too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I have some that's kind of old. Does it expire over time?
Just gets more sour.
Yeah. I don't care about that, but I thought it's probably about a month old. I said I think it's time. I put it off to the side, unfortunately, so out of sight, out of mind.
Donna, are you a dairyman or a consumer?
No, I'm a consumer, but I'm a nurse, and I'm just very interested in that, in kind of organic things. I always say God gave us everything we need to help take care of ourselves. We're the ones that create the bad issues.
Remember this. Remember all those antibiotic-resistant bacteria, including C. diff.
Oh yes.
Those people need to be drinking kefir raw milk kefir like crazy.
I'll try to tell them that. I won't be able to document it, but I'll tell them that.
All right.
We actually even have on our website a letter to medical professionals that has all kinds of references in there showing the health benefits of raw milk. So you don't have.
I live in Taunton. Do you know the closest farm to me, place that I could get it?
Where do you live?
Taunton is kind of near Brockton, and
You might check in with Chuck Curry. He might,
Okay,
at Freedom Food Farm, he might have resources or know.
yeah, I
of a
have a
network.
CSA there. Okay, I'll ask.
Yeah.
And Donna, I'm your neighbor in Berkeley, and I'm considering doing this now. So my farm is called Stargazer Hollow in Berkeley.
Okay, I was saying, you mean making it or drinking it?
Making, yeah.
Star Hollow?
Stargazer Hollow, like the Stargazer lilies.
Okay. All right, perfect.
Any other questions or thoughts? It's coming up on about an hour and a half, and I'll make sure we get everybody in. Laura Dyke, you're an organic farmer, or are you one of the? I thought you were a dairyman.
I have a farm and I do have goats, which,
Okay.
yeah, we're organic. But I haven't been selling my milk on the regular market.
Okay.
I do sell it to a soap producer, so that, which is what I said in the notes.
Very good. Very good. Well, you're an innovator. That's cool.
So I do have a question for you, because one of the techniques that a lot of dairy people, when they birth they take the babies away from the mothers. I like to keep my babies with my moms. Can you still do that and go through this process?
The answer is yes and no.
Okay.
There's a higher risk profile with having a calf or a kid on the mother's udder, because calves and kids generally are kind of a cross-contamination nightmare. We've seen it done, but the problem is you're going to see a lot of variability in the testing when you do the testing. So
Okay.
those that generally, I'm saying this generally because there are exceptions, but what we've experienced, what Sarah and I and everybody have been working with, is generally those that are dedicated to human consumption raw milk generally keep the calves as far away from the cows as possible in terms of that cross-contamination issue. If you've heard of the fairground issues in the fall when kids come in and pet the calves and they get E. coli, that's because the calves are they're like a magnet. The veterinarians and the food safety people we have said, we are not living in a normal set of conditions as human beings. We are taking antibiotics. We're living in cities. We're not connected to the manure like we would have been 120 years ago. So we have to be very cautious about those children with weakened immune systems getting around products that have a pathogen. So this is not a natural set of conditions we're producing raw milk for. We're producing raw milk for every possible potential consumer that could have a weakened immune system or a strong immune system, whatever in between, because we can't sort through them to know who's a cancer survivor and who's not. So at this point, we really strongly encourage people to manage their calves holistically, but be careful about having them connected to milk cows. Put them on a cow, put them on a goat that would be not connected to the human milk side. Put them on a nurse, a calf or cow that's segregated. Those kinds of things. I know that doesn't sound very warm and fuzzy, but it has been very much part of keeping the liability low and the consumers healthy and everybody happy.
But isn't it important that the calves get the colostrum?
Absolutely.
They're-
That's the
But
For their
that's
own health down the road.
100%. The first
few weeks.
100%. The first 4 or 5 days. Absolutely. Completely.
Okay.
Yep.
So can you separate? So if I keep my babes on until I wean, like 6 to 8 weeks, and then how long a separation before you can start using the milk for human consumption?
Well, you would use it right away, but you do some testing at that point to make sure everything's
Okay.
good. Or there'll be no sign of anything going wrong there. Yeah, no problem. But just remember that generally speaking, in most of my experiences in cows, not goats, but generally speaking, that the calves or the goats or any newborn in that environment is a higher risk profile environment than one that is the cows and the calves are kids are separated at least a couple of weeks after calving. It's just when you look at the data, that's what you see.
Okay.
Now, I will say some of our listed farmers do choose to keep their calves with their cows, and we don't say you can't do that. We're not the raw milk police, but what we do say is, okay, if you're going to do that, let's try to dial in everything as great as we possibly can. Mark mentioned earlier that we know that fresh cows or fresh goats would be the time when there's more likely to be pathogens. So we encourage all of our farmers to make sure they're withholding that milk from direct human consumption for a period of time. And some of them will use specific testing to determine when they're going to actually start using the milk. Mark said they do 40 days at his farm. Some of the other farms will do mastitis tests and some other, bacterial tests to see. You're basically trying to wait until that milk supply gets really regulated and dialed in so that you're kind of past that time when everything's a little bit in flux and they're more likely to get mastitis and inflammation and stuff like that. So, it's not like a hard line and no one can ever do it. We do see people that do it, but what Mark is sharing is what we know is if you want to be as low risk as possible, this is a practice that we know it introduces a little bit of risk with it as well.
And Sarah, I'm so glad Sarah said that because we're not the raw milk police and everybody's going to have a little bit their own way to do things. And that's totally fine. Separate conditions, separate everything. And so what we want you to do is just the best you could be given the conditions you're in. So what we do is try to optimize and give you more information to make decisions from. And some of those decisions you will not follow 100%, but you'll do those things that will set up the best conditions for you.
Does anybody have any other questions? If we missed
I'd like
anything.
to make a comment. That is that I hope you found this presentation valuable, and I hope that you'll tell other people or farmers, dairy farmers, to view this presentation. Let them know that it's available as a recording, and also encourage them to visit the website of the Raw Milk Institute. We want
to add
to spread the word and teach as many people as possible.
I want to add to that.
Teach
so
other potential customers for raw milk.
That there's 89 dairies out there that have been abandoned by their organic processor. And if you could reach out to those to let them know that there's an alternative if they would want to do this direct marketing. I know there's some dairies that want no part of it, but there may be some that just don't know that would be well informed to try this as a thought, because it's pretty desperate times. You don't have a processor and you've got a bunch of cows you're milking or whatever, and you don't have a place to sell it. This is another option.
We need lots of small organic dairy farms in the Northeast. We can't let these so-called organic CAFOs take over that are down there in the South and so on, and just producing so-called organic milk on a massive scale. This is really, raw milk is ideal for local, small, pastured organic dairy farms. So that they have something like 20 to 100 cows, somewhere in that neighborhood. These are fantastic little farms, and we need lots of them spread across New England.
That's right.
And we welcome all of you guys, no matter your size too, as far as how many animals you have. Our RAWMI listed farms in Oregon, they're not allowed to have more than 2. And
3,
so
I think.
2 or 3,
It's
yeah,
3.
it depends on which ones are producing milk. So we're open for any size farm for mentoring. I see a question, maybe you already answered this. Do you have a time frame estimate to convert small Northeast organic dairies to raw sales?
We're not in charge of it. We're just offering this information to those dairies if they would so choose want to go to raw. We have not heard. I think we've heard from 1 or 2.
I think maybe she's asking how long would it take somebody to switch over?
Oh, it has to do with how fast they create their market. I will say we have a RAWMI producer. His name's Ben. I think it's in Virginia.
Mhm.
He went from 0 to 800 families in a cow share in about 1.5 years. His sales are massive. He's milking, I don't know, 60, 70 cows. He's doing really, really, really well. But his wife is really, really good at social networks and letting people know that they're there. So I would say producing raw milk, you have to have the food safety thing down cold as just a basic foundation. But your growth is going to have to do with reaching people and how fast you can reach people. If you're good at reaching people, you're going to grow. You're going to grow fast. If you have the supply for them and your safety is together, nobody's getting sick, everybody's getting healthy and happy, then it has to do with how fast you can reach people. That's my opinion.
So I want to wrap us up. I want to thank you all for such an engaged session and an informative session. Really appreciate the three of you being here from all your various different locations, New Mexico, New Jersey, and California, and for everyone with such good questions and engagement here. I posted some links in the chat again that you can check out that are relative to the conference. And there's an evaluation link posted there as well. You can give 5-star ratings to this fantastic crew from the Raw Milk Institute. It was nice to meet you all. And I hope that those of you that are attending the conference are still hanging on with us tomorrow. We have still some programming tomorrow. You can check out the program book. Our keynote happens at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time with Precious Fury. And so, yeah, thank you very much for being here. It's a very nice session. I enjoyed myself and learned a lot.
You're welcome. And I wanted
Thank
to
you,
have a
Jason,
shout out to
for-
Suzanne Trudeau Parker there. Sweetheart, you keep it up. I'm betting on you, the next generation. You go get them.
Yeah. I will also add to that, Suzanne and your daughter there. I secretly messaged Christy Bassett, who's on our staff, who makes soap and has goats, and her daughter's 11-year-old, and she's milking 2 goats right now. So I heard that you're doing 3. Christy was really impressed.
Well, yes,
you.
Gabrielle's the one who's doing all the milking.
That's great, Gabrielle. Keep it up.
Thank you.
How old are you, Gabrielle?
14.
Okay, I want to pass that on to Christy.
Yes.
Good for you, Gabrielle. I'm really proud of you.
She's the granddaughter of a dairy farmer. My dad was a dairy farmer up in Canada. And I grew up on raw milk, but it was harder to find when I came down in the States. But my husband was in the Navy. So we used to live in California. I used to drink your raw milk back in 2002.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Couple other things I'd like to add is that you may want to check out the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund. It's a great resource for legal aspects of selling directly to consumers, not just raw milk, but lots of different foods. And then
Okay.
also there's another organization, and I was on the board of that too. It's called the Farm to Consumer Foundation. Farm to Consumer Foundation. You can look them up. We have 2 books that we published. One is called Producing Fresh Milk, the Cow Edition. And then the second book is Producing Fresh Milk, the Goat Edition. So goat dairy farms might really like that book that we have on goats, the Goat Edition. So, because we wrote it specifically for goats,
Okay.
for goat dairy farms.
Sounds
It also might be helpful for you guys, since there's so many goat farmers on here. The farms that are listed with us, all of their risk management plans and procedures are on our website. You can download them and look at them. You can see what they're doing. So there's a spot where all the listed farmers are. We only have 1 listed goat farmer at this point, but it's actually a microbiologist who has her own lab too. And so that's a resource for you guys to look at as well, if you just want to see what other farmers are doing and how they're managing their risks. Well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for managing the text, Sarah. Really appreciate it. Nice job.
Thank you, Jason, for your service to
Thank
the
you,
organic
Jason.
community.
You bet.
My pleasure. Hope to see you guys again soon sometime.
You go, Gabriel. Go get them. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye now.